Good evening and welcome to BATV News. I'm Kenil Gale. Communications specialist at the National Works Agency, NWA, Stephen Shaw, says the NWA team is still assessing the damage caused by flooding in various parishes following the recent heavy rains. He was a guest on BATV's business discussion show On Point last night. Nordia Francis Williams reports.
Parts of Clarendon and St. Mary have been identified as the worst affected areas from the heavy rains which recently lashed the island. NWA communications specialist Stephen Shaw says while he already knows some statistics surrounding the extent of damage caused by the recent heavy rains, he is not at liberty to disclose them at this point.
Those will first make their way to the core ministry, the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, and ultimately will find its way on the desk of the Prime Minister and Cabinet.
Not the Ministry of Works?
Well, the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, there is no Ministry of Works per se, does have that particular responsibility for works, and the Prime Minister is the minister with overall responsibility for the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation.
However, he says the NWA has been focused on the cleaning and clearing of roads that were impacted and can reopen immediately.
There are a few that before we are in a position to have them reopened, some amount of civil works will have to be done because we have had embankments being washed away, we have had bridge approaches being damaged, and we need to put in retaining walls, we need to put in fill, and we have a couple that have been badly scoured and the rivers being in spate. And where we depend on river shingle, we have to allow some time for the rivers to go down for us to be in a position to retrieve some shingle and have temporary reinstatement works done.
In the meantime, the communications specialist says some further assessments will be done by the agency's engineers.
We have some 4 structures that were impacted. We have one in the parish of St. Mary, and we have 3, when I say structures, I mean bridges.
I was just about to ask.
Right, 3 in the parish of Clarendon.
I know 2 bridges washed away.
Right.
And the other 2, what's the extent of the damage?
Damage to approaches. In the case of Alley Bridge, which is in the southern section of Clarendon, and the bridge at Topderry in the parish of St. Mary. But we have also had other structures in terms of retaining walls.
Stephen Shaw also says some significant work will have to be done in St. Mary.
Those features in the section of the Morant Johnson River, what they do is serve to reduce the current and the flow of the water in the channel, as well as to prevent the river from meandering beyond that area where the diamonds are, to impact. There's a community, there is the dump close to that area. The NWA has property, our parish office is actually in that location, and so too the parish court that was relocated not so long ago. So we have to make sure that that area is protected.
For BATV News, I'm Nordia Francis Williams.
Meanwhile, Senior Engineering Officer at the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation, Jeremy Lawrence, says the city was not impacted as badly as other areas across the country. Amita Prasad Webb reports.
Jeremy Lawrence says the city fared well despite the heavy rains last week.
We had some land slippages in the rural areas and a few blocked and flooded drains in the corporate area. Most of them have been reopened so far, and for those that haven't, we are working to get it opened.
In the meantime, NWA communications specialist Stephen Shaw says the agency has rolled out a project on Mona Road in St. Andrew as a part of their major infrastructure development program.
I've started some work there. It won't mitigate all of the issues that we see along Mona Road, but certainly we are going to be making a big jump insofar as making that particular corridor a little bit more reliable. So it's drainage and it's a little bit of widening, but most of the money, which is over $70 million, is being spent to mitigate flooding in that particular area.
He says the agency is working to improve the flow of water there, as the current road acts as the drain.
It's a combination of things that we'll have to do. Naturally, there's a low spot where the floodwaters drain to, and if you look at Mona Road, the houses, the properties on either side of the road are a bit higher than the road itself.
Yes,
so
they are.
The road acts pretty much as a drain, and so we have to find a way now to put, there are gullies around, and we have to channel the water to these areas. In other words, we have to take more of the water off the road and put those in the channels that are available.
Meanwhile, Jeremy Lawrence says it is a standard engineering principle to have roads designed as a part of the drainage system.
The drain is supposed to carry most of the flow, and the road is designed to carry enough flow to allow passage. So in most design cases, the road is actually part of the drainage system.
And it's designed that way?
It is designed that way. So for example, let's say a road is designed for a certain event storm, which is normally a 10-year storm, 25-year storm. What we normally expect is that 75% of the volume of the water expected should be carried by the drains, and at least half of each lane should be covered with water, but it should allow for access even during the event.
For BATV News, I'm Amita Prasad Webb.
Sterling Investments has released its unaudited financial statements for the first quarter ended March 2017. The company says for the period under review, its net interest income totaled $17 million. This is 1.4% lower than the $17.3 million recorded for the corresponding period in 2016. Here is Anthony Morgan with the details.
Sterling Investments says its net interest margin increased to 93.7% from 93.1%. The company says gain on sale of investments for the quarter was $13.4 million, primarily due to the overall improvement in the bond markets, including the high yield and emerging markets. Sterling Investments says with the Jamaican dollar depreciating against the US dollar by 23 cents for the quarter, there were unrealized foreign exchange gains for the 3 months of $1.1 million compared to $11 million in 2016. Meanwhile, the company reports that gross revenue for the quarter was $32.6 million compared to $28.4 million in the matching 2016 period. It says bond trading in the first quarter of the year was much improved and assets were strategically selected to increase the revenue of the portfolio. Net profit after taxes for the quarter was $18.4 million, down from the $19.1 million for the period ending March 2016. Sterling says operating expenses for the quarter was $6.3 million, a 23.7% increase over last year, and was mainly due to increased management fees. In the meantime, the investment company says total assets increased by approximately 16.5% from $927.6 million to a little over $1 billion as at March 2017. It says this was largely attributed to the increase in investment securities. It also says margin loans totaled $218.5 million, with total equity increasing by 17.5% from $701.5 million in 2016 to $824.5 million. For BATV News, I'm Anthony Morgan.
Still to come, Tourism Minister Ed Bartlett wants the CDB to invest more in tourism. The details after the break. Welcome back. Financial institutions, including the Caribbean Development Bank, CDB, are being urged by Tourism Minister Ed Bartlett to better support small and medium tourism enterprises and invest more in tourism in the region. Minister Bartlett's analysis came out of his participation in a high-level panel discussion yesterday at the 47th annual meeting of the Board of Governors of the CDB in the Turks and Caicos Islands. More in this report.
Minister Bartlett says that even though 1 in 11 workers in the world work with the tourism industry and some $7.6 trillion of tourism expenditure happened last year globally, only a very meager 0.15% of the multilateral and donor agency funds go into tourism globally. That, he points out, is less than 0.25% of all the loans provided. The tourism minister says that it needs to change. He's calling for a shift in the attitude towards the industry so that more can be provided for the people who can contribute to the development of the region. He notes that the banking system in the Caribbean is yet to come to grips with the demand for tourism and the development of the kind of portfolio that will allow small and medium tourism enterprises to have access to the requisite funds. This, the minister says, is in light of the fact that the Caribbean is the most tourism-dependent region on Earth, with over 50% of GDP and 1 in 5 workers being tourism-related for at least 16 of 28 nations in the region. Meanwhile, Minister Bartlett points out that a 2014 report conducted by the United Nations Environment Programme showed that the Caribbean, though being the most tourism-dependent region on Earth, had the highest level of leakage of tourism expenditure. He says 80 cents of every dollar is being leaked, meaning it goes back to pay for the cost of tourism, the visitor, and the inputs of the industry that are required. In the case of Jamaica, he says the report pointed out that the island was at 70%, with 30 cents of the dollar staying in Jamaica and 70 cents leaving. The Caribbean Development Bank, CDB, is a regional financial institution that was created for the purpose of contributing to the economic growth and development of member countries in the Caribbean. It assists Caribbean nations in financing social and economic programs.
Jamaicans are being encouraged to invest in their own ideas and products. Executive Director of the Scientific Research Council, SRC, Dr. Cliff Riley, says growth will only come when people invest in Jamaica and ensure that we have good products that can stand the test of time. Dr. Riley was speaking at the SRC's Opportunity Quest yesterday at the Council's Hope Road offices. He said Jamaicans are very creative people, but noted that there is a fear among investors and innovators in Jamaica. He said while we have local products, there is a fear of investing in them. Dr. Riley explained that during the National Innovation Awards that is held biannually, there are many outstanding and impressive inventions. However, years later, these persons have yet to develop on their ideas as they are trying to mass produce. That is why he's encouraging persons to start small, even if it is with just one product. Foreign Affairs Minister Senator Kamina Johnson-Smith says the situation in Venezuela continues to occupy the minds of government leaders and foreign policy practitioners in the region. She says the situation has also placed Jamaica's international relations and foreign policy in the spotlight, both nationally and regionally. Tanika Bennett reports.
Senator Johnson-Smith notes that there have been questions raised about Jamaica's response and participation at meetings at the Organization of American States, OAS, regarding the crisis in Venezuela. She says, as an active member of the OAS and one which takes its international responsibility seriously, Jamaica will continue to attend meetings of the OAS in order to obtain accurate information, to properly assess any given situation, and to make its contribution to the formulation of well-informed decisions. She argues that there should be no misunderstanding regarding the justification of attendance at these meetings, as Jamaica fulfills its obligations in trying to find a diplomatic and helpful solution to the crisis in Venezuela. The Foreign Affairs Minister notes that Jamaica has been present at meetings of the OAS Permanent Council to hear presentations from other member states, including Venezuela, on developments in that country. She notes that the government believes that when questions arise regarding the essential elements of democracy, such as the separation of powers, periodic, free and fair elections, access to and exercise of power in accordance with the rule of law, then the OAS is the appropriate forum for deliberations on such matters in order to help to peacefully resolve the situation. Meanwhile, she says Jamaica does not support the unauthorized and adverse utterances of the OAS Secretary General on the situation in Venezuela and in relation to the government of Venezuela. She says the comments have not been helpful in achieving a peaceful resolution of the current situation. For BATV News, I am Tanika Bennett.
Stay with us. Regional and international stories are after the break. Welcome back. In San Cristobal in Venezuela, most of the public transport system has been shut down for nearly a month. The unrest has left many cities paralyzed for weeks. More in this report.
As if the scarcity of food wasn't enough, English teacher Johnny Parra says his daily commute has become an odyssey.
I get up before 5 a.m. to get in at 9. I walk to the center of town and try my best to catch a ride, which has become very complicated.
The bus that used to take him to work in 20 minutes has stopped running, as did most public transportation here in San Cristobal, Venezuela. Hundreds of people burned buses recently, so transport companies have shut down service. People wait for hours for informal pickup trucks, hoping one will go their way.
This is what we need to do day in, day out, despite the risk. You have to be creative to get to work to avoid getting punished or lose your job.
San Cristobal in the state of Táchira is an opposition stronghold. Venezuela has been dealing with an economic crisis that's led to violent protests and food shortages. Some are taking advantage of the growing unrest against the government by ransacking shops and supermarkets. Robberies and murders are on the rise. Many stores are shut, while criminals control the streets leading into town, cutting off the supply of food and petrol. When gasoline is available, lines stretch for blocks in this oil-rich country.
I have been in line for 2 hours now. We have got used to it. The government blames the students and protests, but this has been happening for quite a while now.
Most local schools remain open, but classrooms are often empty because parents are too scared to send in their children.
The city of San Cristobal is just 1 hour away from this bridge connecting with neighboring Colombia. And while it has become a treacherous journey, tens of thousands of people from the state of Táchira and beyond make the trip on a daily basis in search of food, medicine, and really anything they can't get a hold of back home.
A week ago, President Nicolás Maduro promised to solve the problem by sending in thousands of soldiers and National Guardsmen. Yet none have arrived. Normally in such a strongly opposition town, people don't want more government forces on the street. But many now say they'd be ready to compromise in exchange for some help. Alessandro Ampietti, Al Jazeera, Cúcuta.
Cuba's first five-star hotel opened its doors this week. It's run by a European company. But U.S. firms, too, are queuing up to do travel business there in the hope that U.S. President and hotel operator Donald Trump doesn't close the door on Havana. David Pollard reports.
It may look like a car if in fact it's not. The cruise ship, though, is the real thing. And here at this tourism conference in Havana, there's a sense that for U.S. visitors, Cuba's travel trade is becoming so too.
We're in the hospitality business, so we want to be doing business everywhere where our guests want to visit. We believe our guests want to visit Cuba, which is why we're here.
A record 4 million visitors arrived in Cuba in 2016. After US President Obama eased travel restrictions 2 years ago, that included 285,000 Americans, a relatively small number, but who feel that despite Donald Trump's talk of rolling back relations, there's a big draw.
my mother, my father, none of them have had the opportunity to come. So now that it's open, I think a lot of Americans, especially younger Americans that are now doing the, abroad and seeing more outside of our normal, are definitely going to want to come to Cuba. I think it's beautiful.
Cuba's first five-star hotel has just opened its doors, though that's run by Europe's Kempinski, and US online booker Expedia is now offering Cuba options. It joins around a dozen US airlines and cruise operators to already venture there.
To me, it seems as if it is getting ready. The infrastructure seems like they're definitely doing work on it to improve some conditions of the city, Old Havana, and kind of get ready for the tourism that's coming in. I mean, the cruise ships alone, that's tons of people.
And tons more could come. One survey predicts US visitor numbers to go from the current trickle to a significant wave, as many as 2 million a year expected by 2025.
The U.S. economy grew faster than initially thought in the first quarter, but it's still the worst performance since the first quarter of 2016. Fred Katayama tells us more.
The U.S. economy grew faster than originally thought in the first quarter. Gross domestic product rose 1.2% instead of the 0.7% the Commerce Department reported last month. That was more than economists had expected. The slow start to the year is still a blow to President Donald Trump's goal to sharply accelerate economic growth. Barclays chief economist Michael Gapin said the second estimate paints a better picture about the degree of slowing in activity at the start of the year, but the main concern about soft growth in private consumption remains. Accounting for the upwardly revised pace of growth, consumer spending, it rose at twice the rate that was initially reported, up 0.6%. That's key because consumer spending accounts for 2/3 of economic activity. Investors saw some signs of that Friday as two retailers posted strong quarterly sales. Warehouse club operator Costco wholesale sales shot up 8%, while video game retailer GameStop sales climbed nearly 4%. Both results beat Wall Street's targets.
Leaders from the world's major industrialized nations began talks today at a G7 summit in Sicily, Italy. The summit is expected to expose deep divisions between other leaders and U.S. President Donald Trump over trade and climate change. Laura Fragberg reports.
A rather harmonious-looking photo op for G7 leaders meeting in Sicily. Donald Trump perhaps learned his lesson a day earlier when this video of him at a NATO family photo in Brussels went viral. But despite the pleasantries on day one, the two-day summit could still see some conflict.
What's going to be very interesting about this G7 meeting is the divergence of opinion on so many issues between Donald Trump and his counterparts on the G7, around the G7 table.
Climate change and globalization for one. Trump's threatened to pull out of the Paris climate deal, which all G7 members are part of. He's also been critical of free trade, the very foundation of the 7 major industrialized nations. For some, that all points to another major player.
The elephant not in the room is China, which has just, of course, concluded its substantial Belt and Road conference in Beijing, is participating in one of the biggest investment programs the world has ever seen. It seems anachronistic in many respects to prevent China from taking its place round the table and maybe turning it into G8 from G7.
Italy is hosting the summit in Sicily to draw attention to Europe's migration crisis, where tens of thousands of people have arrived after crossing the Mediterranean. Many from nations facing the threat of famine, say these activists, including Yemen, Nigeria, Somalia and South Sudan.
Talking Stocks comes up after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Time now for Talking Stocks. 53 stocks traded today, of which 15 advanced, 29 declined, and 9 traded firm. The main JSE index declined by 997 points to close at 234,419 points. The junior index also declined, going down by 71 points to close at 3,293 points. Over 6 million units traded today, valued at more than $94 million on the Jamaican dollar market, while on the US dollar market, over 56,000 units traded, valued at over 17,000 US dollars. Lasco distributors with over 1 million units changing hands accounted for 18% of market volume. Sagicor Group was second with over 1 million units trading. Cable and Wireless with over 982,000 units accounted for 14% of market volume crossing the floor. Salada Foods was the top advancer, up $1 to close at $8.50, followed by Consolidated Bakeries up 26 cents to close at $2.88, and Caribbean Producers up 26 cents to close at $3.50. The main decliners were medical disposables and supplies, losing 46 cents to close at $5.19, followed by Margaritaville Turks going down 3 cents to close at 34 cents, and the Dolphin Cove went down $1.40, closing at $20.06. And that's all the news we have for you this evening. But before we go, a recap of our top story. Communications specialist at the National Works Agency, NWA, Stephen Shaw, says the team is still assessing the damage caused by flooding in various parishes following the recent heavy rains. Thanks for watching. For more content, please visit our website at batvja.com. I'm Kenil Gale. Pleasant viewing.